That's because we have two special guests with us, Whitney Austin and Katy Coburn.
Now, Whitney Austin was shot 12 times in the Fifth Third Bank Center shooting on September the 6th. 3 other people and the shooter were killed in that incident. Cincinnati police officer Alphonzo Staples, one of the first on the scene, helped to rescue Austin after she became trapped in a revolving door during the shooting. Austin spent 5 days at UC Medical Center. The 37-year-old was working as a vice president and senior product development manager for the bank, and she usually worked in Louisville, where she lives with her husband and 2 children, but she made regular trips to the bank's headquarters in downtown Cincinnati, including the one she made on the morning of the shooting. In the months since then, Austin has formed the Whitney Strong organization. It's part of her effort to end gun violence with common sense solutions. Now, her story is featured in the current issue of Cincinnati Magazine, and Whitney joins us now, along with Katy Coburn, who actually wrote that article for Cincinnati Magazine. And thanks to both of you for joining us this morning to talk about something that kind of transformed the city of Cincinnati in so many different ways. And my first question to you is, how are you doing?
I am doing really, really well. You know, I am always cognizant of the gratitude that I have. If you think about what I went through and the fact that I came out and I got to reunite with my family, I just spend all of my energy thinking about that and being grateful for what was given to me.
When I was reading through the article, and Katy, take us through sort of a moment by moment review of that morning, I think to myself, you've decided to commit yourself to this project, which almost forces you to relive those moments in some ways, because people ultimately are going to ask you all the time, because of the project and what you want to accomplish. How hard is it for you to relive that morning?
Actually, I think about it in an entirely different way. I think I can spend all of my energy going back to that horrific moment and the trauma, or I can substitute it with thoughts of hope and the courage that I have found to fight against gun violence. So I really just swap the thoughts, the negative thoughts out, and I replace them with positive thoughts in terms of trying to make a difference.
And when you guys thought about doing this piece, how did you approach her? How did you approach the piece of what, because there's so many different ways you could have done this?
Yeah, so originally I actually reached out to Whitney in November about a story that I was writing for UC College of Nursing. So one of their nursing alumnus, Robbie Thomas, actually cared for Whitney at UCMC, and the college for their winter magazine wanted me to write a profile piece because I freelance for them in the off time. But so I actually asked Whitney if she would be comfortable with sharing her story for a feature story for Cincinnati Magazine, because I realized there was a bigger story to tell with her nonprofit and the plans she had for her nonprofit.
Yep. In looking at, I want to talk about the nonprofit in a moment, but in looking at the story that was written too, I noticed one of the major features is this picture that you include, that is Whitney and the police officer Alphonzo
Staples.
And it just occurred to me, these are 2 people whose lives would not have intersected except for this terrible thing that happened. Was that a conscious decision to pair those 2
Oh, definitely.
in this article like this?
Definitely. And they still keep in touch today. Whitney mentioned to me that she named her therapy cat after him, and they're close friends. And so he was an integral part of the story, so I definitely wanted to include him in the story.
Let's talk about the project a little bit. As you say, you take these moments where you could dwell on the negative, or you could look sort of ahead, look to the future, try to find hope in these moments. And certainly there are a lot of things to be hopeful about. Al, everybody just calls him Al.
Yeah.
Coming to your aid in that moment, and the doctors who came to your aid once you got to the hospital. How do you go after ending something that is such a controversial issue that people's walls go up immediately? It seems to be when you talk about something like this. What is the way you're going to attack this problem?
Well, I think first off, I can't get those thoughts, those visions out of my head of being stuck at that revolving door. So that is something that will drive me and propel me for the rest of my life. And in terms of as to how I want to approach it, I want to do it in what I think is a very unique manner, to approach it from the center so that we can bring both sides of the political aisle together to find solutions that everybody can support and are also proven to be effective. So we believe through Whitney Strong we are going to take a very unique approach, and because of that we can be more effective than potentially what we've seen so far, which feels like not a lot of traction. But I can tell you lately it seems as if the tide is turning. There's even positive news out of DC that we see some very prominent Republicans, for example, willing to get behind solutions such as extreme risk protection orders. So I think there is really a tide turning at this point, and I'm excited to try and lead from the center.
Okay.
I'm going to try not to get emotional. I lost my brother to gun violence of his own hand. He was mentally ill and he took his own life. And he should not have had a gun if there were better background checks. So I know that that's one of the things that you're focusing on as you kind of work as a bipartisan solution for this problem. Can you talk a little bit more about the things you want the organization to do? I know that's part of it, is looking into maybe expanding some background checks and that type of thing.
I am so sorry. Suicide prevention is one of the things that we are very, very focused on. We have 2 solutions that will touch on it. One is setting up several suicide prevention programs that originated out of New Hampshire. One example I'll give you is really simple, putting suicide prevention literature within gun shops. So basic, but potentially that's something that could save lives. And then the second solution we're very focused on that touches suicide is extreme risk protection orders. It's that idea that if you know someone, and it certainly needs to be a limited scope as to who can petition, but if you know someone who is in the throes of a crisis, whether they're going to hurt themselves or they're going to hurt other people, there is a very clear path for temporarily removing that firearm to get them through that period of time. And then in many instances you get through it and then you can have your firearm returned to you. But we believe strongly that there are multiple avenues to trying to approach suicide prevention.
And I think those are one of the reasons why I think people should check out your organization is that you have suggestions like these that I think everybody could agree of. Putting suicide prevention literature in a gun store is something I think everybody could get behind.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We don't want ideas that are too political or too controversial or unproven. Let's focus on those things that everybody can agree upon, and let's make incremental progress, because that is better than where we are today, which feels at many times like a stalemate.
One thing that I took from the article that was written in the magazine is that an important partner for you in this is your husband. And the fact that when you were stuck in that revolving door, you were telling Officer Staples, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, you have to save me. When something like this happens, the person who is hit by the bullets is not the only victim. How is your family doing? Are they helping you in either psychologically or emotionally or whatever in your travels now?
My family is everything to me. Every single person that I saw that day that aided in my recovery, I said, I have a 5 and a 7-year-old and you have to get me back home to them. I have to be their mother. And so they are everything to me. They give me all the strength in the world, both them and my husband. And so I am the luckiest person alive that I came through this and I got back to what I wanted. So I also want to mention that it is so easy for me to do this because I am grateful and I got what I wanted out of that situation. There were sadly others that did not. And so I'm always so sensitive to trying to convey the way I am able to behave and the things that I am able to do is because of the outcome for me. And we all need to be sensitive of others impacted by gun violence because it doesn't end as well for them so many more times.
Katy, what do you hope that people are able to take away from the article?
Well, I hope that they're able to learn more about Whitney's organization and just open their eyes to the conversation as a whole. Learn more about the events of that day and what actually happened and the people who helped Whitney survive and make the day end better than it could have.
I think we should all read this. So
right.
It's in this current month's issue.
In April.
In April's issue of Cincinnati Magazine.
It is.
I will note seeing it all. It's there, the narrative and your motivations and what's going on now. It just gives you an impact that you just don't get having gotten it piecemeal over the course of time since September.
And it's quite a thing. And you mentioned your husband, and just reading about his experience and being on the other side of it, and trying to get down I-71, and that you are so coherent to be able to speak to him in those 30 seconds on the phone when that officer was holding you. It's something. If you get a chance to read, I would definitely take the time to do it. So thank you both.
They did an excellent job.
Thank you both
They
so
did,
much for
and
being
there's a
here.
reason you're here. I'm convinced it's to do what you're doing, and you're making a difference already, so thank you.